Welcome to Mind Renovation Nation, brought to you by Red Maples, a real estate performance advisory service for small multifamily real estate investors. I'm Nathan Bush, and each show I share with you lessons I've learned from my friends, mentors, and personal journey in real estate. I've designed each show to inspire, motivate, and equip you for your own investing path. In today's episode, I'm going to cover the cash flow crisis. Remember, if you're watching live, drop your questions in the comments, and I'll address as many as I can. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more actionable insights and visit www.nathanbushmba.com for free resources to help you grow your real estate business. Now, let's go. What is up, guys? Welcome to the Mind Renovation Nation show, and welcome back. We're kind of in a challenging spot in real estate. Rents aren't rising like they used to. Expenses are relatively high. Things like insurance, maintenance cost, these things keep going up and up. And there's a small group of investors who are not just surviving, but they're thriving. And in today's episode, I'm going to break down some creative cash flow strategies that are working right now. We're going to talk about the real impact of inflation on small landlords. We're going to talk about some lease adjustments that you can do. We're going to talk about some hidden profit centers. And we're going to talk about some of the biggest mistakes that real estate investors are making right now that are costing them thousands and thousands of dollars. So I'm extremely excited for you to be here today and to share this information with you. Again, if you want more of this type of information, head over to www.nathanbushmba.com for more information like this. All right, so let's talk about the real impact of inflation right now on property owners. In St. Louis, the metropolitan area, the real estate market has experienced notable changes recently. From 2002 to 2003, the median rent increased by approximately 5.83%, according to Yahoo. This upward trend in rent is attributed to the demand that continues to outpace some of the supply, leading to rising prices. The U.S. Sun currently said that property owners are facing escalating expenses. Home insurance premiums have risen significantly. Apartment insurance premiums have risen significantly, driven by record-breaking natural disasters and losses that have increased the development in hazardous areas. Insurers are responding by increasing premiums, doubling deductibles, reducing coverages, and imposing stricter policy conditions. Then the Wall Street Journal combined the factors of rising rents and increasing operational costs that are impacting the profitability of you. So these are happening. These are real things that are happening. Smart investors know that every challenge, though, creates opportunity. So let's talk about what you can do about it. Here's the actual article from the Wall Street Journal that talked about the home insurance bill has gone way up. And as you can see, Missouri's not in the deep dark red, but it's in the bright red. And so these costs continue to go up. So what can you do about it? That is the whole theme of today's show. As things have changed, morphed, developed in just overall in the market has shifted. What are you going to do? How are you going to improve? So let me just share a couple of examples with you, tactics that I know that work to help you achieve improved profitability in real estate. Number one, implementing utility chargebacks. This is a tactic that works in this current market. When margins are tight, you got to look at what your overall utility costs are and make sure that you're billing back for all the utilities. So what are all the utilities that you can bill back for? Well, it depends on what the tenants can put in their name versus what they can't put in their name and that the owner ultimately is responsible for. In St. Louis, things like the sewer bill can be billed back to the resident. The water bill can be billed back to the resident. And what we like to do at Red Maples is to break those bills up on a monthly basis on a flat fee. So whatever the average is of the last 6 months or 12 months, we go back and take a historical look. And even at renewal, if the bill has gone up to the owner, those bill backs get added back into the rent for the tenant. We also look at not just sewer, but what about water or trash? If those can't be put into the owner's names, those are all bills that you can essentially put and make the tenant responsible for on a bill back to the tenant. There's other things that you can add in as well to the lease that you can bill to the tenant that is helpful, like a bill back for pest control if you offer pest control services on a regular basis. Instead of billing the tenant at the actual pest control service, you can literally bill the tenant on a monthly basis for that pest control service and make sure that you have enough in there for the whole year to be able to treat your property and make sure it's taken care of. And then some administrative fees and work, like you can add a couple dollars a month in administrative fees into the lease that will allow you to be able to collect additional premium on top of the rent in order to drive some margin for yourself. You can see the thing is that a lot of investors don't understand this. You're losing hundreds of dollars every month if you're not billing back the utilities in the utility chargeback. Now, it's not just utilities that you can bill back for to improve these margins. You can also adjust the timing of the renewal to avoid vacancy loss. So let me explain to you how this works. It's difficult in real estate and rentals to lease during the winter months when it's snowing outside. It's just more difficult. And so filling properties during the winter months is a challenge. And so what you want to do is try to time it during peak leasing seasons. So for instance, March is a peak leasing season. July, August timeframe, right at the end of summer, coming into the next school year as you go into September, that's peak leasing season. And so you want to try to time those lease renewals around peak leasing season. And so you're making adjustments to avoid vacancy loss. And so the way that might look is you might negotiate with a tenant on the lease renewal. Instead of putting a lease renewal out for just 1 year, maybe you give them two different options. Maybe one is a 15 or 18-month option, and the other one might be a 1-year option. And the one that's the 18-month option might be a little bit less than the rents that you're putting out for the 12-month option. And so the way that conversation typically works is you call up Miss Jones and you say, Miss Jones, we are getting ready to renew your lease. We're at that time. And so we're going to offer you two different options. We have an 18-month option and we have a 12-month option. The 18-month option is about $35 a month less. So normally your rent for, let's say, $835. And if you do it, the rents are going to be renting a 12-month option for $835. But if you go 18 months, we can do it for $800. And so what I wanted to know, though, from you before we even do the renewal, is there anything going on inside of your apartment unit that you're unhappy with? Is there any maintenance service or anything that needs to be done that would be preventing you from renewing the property with us? That is the key goal there, is to give them the opportunity to tell you about what's going on in their property, what they love, and why they would stay. And so then once they say, then you just circle back. Hey, if I can commit to getting those things done for you and getting those things done quickly, would you re-sign your lease for 18 months? And 9 times out of 10, that's not even a problem. They just want to see that you're responsive. You're going to take care of things when it comes time for renewal. And so adjusting those renewals is critical in avoiding vacancy during the off seasons. Another way to drive those margins is simply starting the lease renewal process earlier. So instead of just starting the lease renewal process 30 days out, maybe you start this renewal process 90 days out or 120 days out, thus giving the tenant a little bit less time to shop around and try to make a decision on the renewal earlier in the process. They're either staying or going, and they're making that decision earlier in the renewal, earlier in their lease, where the chance that there's still very satisfied inside of the home. There hasn't been something major that's broken or has happened inside of that home. And so you can deal with that significantly earlier in the process is my whole point. So 2 different options for lease renewal. Just a reminder, you can adjust the timing of how long the lease is for. You can also adjust the timing of when you send the lease renewal. All right. And then if you're, looking at things that work, how about adding additional fees to your lease? Don't just copy and paste a generic lease and think that your lease is going to be fantastic. You need to work with an attorney that has your best interest in heart, that really is taking a look at what you can do to maximize profitability. And so things like pet fees, or if there's parking or storage income, these are all additional income opportunities for you that you can generate significant more money. And this is a tactic that helps you when things are tight to be able to just drive a little bit more revenue, maybe adding a $20 a month or a $50 a month pet fee or lease. Most people are charging some type of fees, but what they're not doing is looking at what the market will bear for each one of those fees and adjusting them on an annual basis. And so that might be part of the process when you're renewing the leases of negotiating some of these additional charges that the resident would ultimately their benefits that the tenant gets. And so they might have to pay a little bit more for those things when things are tight. And this is just the way that it works right now. This is the biggest thing that I can tell you. We had a client that was with us, and he had a Section 8 tenant that was in his property for 2 years. The tenant put in notice, and the tenant wanted to move out of the property. We can't offer an 18-month lease or 20-month lease or a 24-month lease to a tenant that's on assistance programs. You just can't do it. You can't negotiate it. You can't move the lease around. So what we did do was we offered a renewal gift. And so one of the renewal gifts that you can offer is things like cleaning the carpets or changing out blinds for them. And we happened to offer them a renewal gift. They love the renewal gift so much. We had already put the rent increase in with Section 8. And so when they accepted the renewal gift, they also stayed with us another 12 months. And so that took that tenant from 2 years to 3 years, just because we negotiated and worked through the challenges that tenant was likely having inside of their property at the time. See, I think it's the big thing is that when you're dealing with rent increases or you're dealing with raising rents or you're dealing with negotiating with tenants, I had a guy come to me at a meetup group, and he was talking about the fact that he has a property that he knows some of the properties are significantly under rented. In fact, he knows so well that one of the ladies that's living in his property is on a fixed income, and she actually owes him 3 months of back rent, but she's current on her current rent, and she's paying only $695 a month, but they're renting the new ones for $925 a month. And he hasn't evicted her yet. He hasn't set, and all these leases are on month-to-month leases. And my suggestion to him was very simple. Tell her that you're going to non-renew her lease if she doesn't want to move up to the new rental rate of $925 or $995. You're going to non-renew the lease. And if she doesn't move out by the end of the month because she still owes you 3 months of back rent, that you're going to file an eviction against her account for double rent the following month, because you're going to charge her holdover rent because that should be in your lease. And so a lot of times she'll just move out on her own. There's not a lot that you have to do there. And then you can re-rent that property at $995 or $925, whatever it was, market rate. And so you've got to work through it with the residents, though. You got to talk to them. You've got to have those conversations. Just sending an email or just sending a letter about a rent increase, that's not going to invoke the conversation and help that tenant know that you care about them enough in order for these types of tools to be utilized in the conversation with them. So just keep that in mind, that these types of things, if you're going to drive rents and you're going to squeeze more margin out of a property, you first and foremost, if somebody's on a month-to-month lease, you don't have to keep them there. Secondly, you've got to look at these tactics and these tips that I'm giving you and use them in order, when things are tight, you've got to maximize these types of things. Like, you've got to be paying attention to each and every resident and each and every opportunity for you to drive revenue within your business. And it can't be by overtaxing the tenants. It needs to be by driving revenue properly and responsibly and making sure that you're maintaining efficiently full occupied properties. All right. But beyond the lease, let's talk about some of the hidden income opportunities that are there and available for you, that are just tools that you can utilize. Put, my dad used to say when I was younger, arrows in the quiver, if you will, on things that you can do to grow some revenue. So let's talk about some surprising ways to boost cash flow. Well, last night I went to a meetup group and I learned that one of the owners has a 150 unit high-rise unit. And at the top of the high-rise unit, he had negotiated a 20-year lease with cell carriers. Multiple different cell carriers are using these cell towers at the top of his high-rise building, and he's bringing in additional income to the tune of increasing his property value by over $1 million with these cell towers. That's a surprising way on a small multifamily building in order to be able to increase a significant amount of revenue as cell towers. I don't know if you know this or not, but some of the cable companies will offer you affiliate relationship money. And so you can generate revenue if you offer their cable services specifically to all of your residents and they sign up through your specific link, then they can pay you back additional cash that you make off the property. But see, those aren't the only ways to drive additional profitability inside of your property. There's a number of different ways to do that. One of the different ways that you can drive income off of your property is by, depending on the size of the property, if it's more than 4 units or so, you can make laundry income or even vending machine income. Not a lot of owners I know have really dialed in or thought about the fact that they actually can install vending machines that generate significant amounts of money. But I will give you a perfect example. This is kind of a high end example, but I did a tour of an apartment community downtown St. Louis off of Washington Avenue. And in there was a grocery store, and there was no security for the grocery store. You literally went in and you picked out the items and you wrung out the items on the honor system. However, there was a camera inside of the grocery store. And so you had to badge in and badge out, and there was a camera there. And so those items, if you took them and didn't pay for them at the register in the unattended grocery store or convenience store in the apartment community, they would bill you back against your ledger for the items that were taken from the grocery store. And so you could do the same thing. You don't have to have a 200-unit apartment community in order to install a vending machine and start generating some additional revenue off of your property. So laundry income can drive additional margin. Vending machines can drive additional margin inside of your property. And then you can negotiate better vendor contracts. Better vendor contracts will help you drive additional margin inside of your property. So what does negotiating better vendor contracts look like? Because I have a lot of people just say, well, just go find a hot water heater guy that can do it cheaper. Okay, but cheaper isn't always better. So when I'm talking about negotiating vendor contracts, I'm talking about working with the vendor to be more efficient in the delivery of their service with your business. Let me explain that to you. So maybe it's taking on average right now inside of your rental portfolios. Let's say it's taking on average 35 days to turn a unit from start to finish. But if you could turn that unit in, let's say, 20 days versus 35 days, there's additional money that is being lost every single day that that property's off market. And so maybe you can negotiate with your vendor to get this done in 20 days. And if they get the work done in 20 days, there's an additional bonus that you can add in for that vendor for getting things done within 20-day time frame. And if you do that on 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 different properties within your portfolio, what do you get? More revenue, more revenue. And so by negotiating better contracts with vendors, you can ultimately secure when there's tight margins and cash flow needs to really happen inside your portfolio. If you do these things right, you can actually generate significantly more revenue for your business. And this is where so many investors get this specific issue wrong. Let me explain this. There's some common mistakes that investors are making that they just get it wrong. And so here's some real world examples. And if you're making mistakes, it's not too late to fix them, okay? Ignoring data-driven rent adjustments, just ignoring data in general, right? So like I'm talking about, you got to know your numbers. You got to know how many days it's taking to turn over something. You got to know how long it's taking somebody from the time you put in your initial lease renewal to get them to renew. You got to know when people typically renew inside of your portfolio because you're buying houses in a specific area or a specific type of asset class. And so those people in different asset classes are going to renew in different areas at different times, right? You got to know your data from a standpoint of you got to know what your average rents are renting for. You got to know your data on how much revenue you're deriving from utility income and late fee income and pet rent income. And are you doing, annual inspections to catch tenants that are putting animals inside your property and not paying the additional pet rents and pet deposits that are responsible for? Are you charging the right amount of money for the deposit in order to make sure you're setting aside enough cash for when that property turns over? These are the types of things by ignoring your data, right? What is the average turnover costing you? Are you charging enough money for the tenant to move in so that when the tenant moves out, you have money set aside in order to be able to renovate and fix that property? Ignoring the data does not yield you good results. You have to pay attention to the data. The next thing that I want to talk about is not keeping up with competitive rental prices. So just like in my example of the guy that I met at the meetup group that I was at here recently, who had somebody renting from him for $625 when the current market rates are $925, and he's not been moving it. That's somebody that's operating out of fear of losing the resident, that they're going to have to turn over this property and put money back into it in order to get it on the market. But the problem is that one person is still holding your organization back from maximizing the revenue on a tight margin. It is better to get rid of that situation, increase the rents to almost $300, $260 or whatever it was, increase the rents and make the additional. So $260 a month times just the 10 months is $2,600. And if you had the right deposit on that person when they moved in, so a double deposit would be $1,200 plus you'd be able to apply that upon move out, and then you'd get the $2,600 additional dollars. You're talking about an additional $3,000 to $5,000, depending on how long the next tenant stays, an additional money increase by just getting that tenant that's not paying market rates out, or not raising the rates, not charging the appropriate additional fees or additional amenity charges or utility bill backs that you're supposed to be doing. This is where thousands and thousands of dollars are being lost in efficient operations of different properties, not negotiating these relationships with your vendors, and then ultimately just having a bad lease structure, having the tenant move out at bad time and getting 2 months or 3 months. Even 45 days in some cases can kill the cash flow on a portfolio on rental properties. And so by having too much tenant turnover or tenants turning over at the wrong time, you can lose significant amounts of revenue and not be operating at a peak efficiency. The last thing I'd like to bring up, because I got a case study that I want to bring up for you guys and I want to talk through with you so that you can understand, but bad contractors can take advantage of your rental properties. They can hurt you. They can keep you from making money when margins are tight. And so I'm going to share with you a case study here. This is the case study of a troubled property and turning it into a profitable asset. First and foremost, the start of this case study was this particular property that we managed was a 20-ish unit apartment community. I don't want to give away who, if you're watching online, if you're the owner, I don't want to give it away on who you specifically are. But this particular property was plagued by major operational inefficiencies. It had high vacancy and it had unreliable tenants. And so to make matters worse, what we had identified as a management organization was a dishonest contractor, high vacancy rates, and poor tenant quality. So that's where this was really coming from. When we really dove into the property and we began to understand, we learned that the owner relied on a contractor who was not completing the work as promised, and multiple projects were being left unfinished. There would be paint buckets in the living room. When they said that the property was rent ready, we saw windows that were installed backwards, and this was costing the owner unnecessary money that was keeping him from renting his properties. We also verified and proved that the contractor was dishonest before taking corrective action, because this owner had a great relationship with his contractor. The owner was out of state. The contractor was here locally, obviously, and the contractor was not giving factual information back to the owner. And we proved it. It took us about 4 or 5 months to prove it, maybe 6 months to prove it, but we proved it. And then we were able to start our work. There was high vacancy rates inside this property as well due to poor tenant quality. So the owner was previously filling the units primarily with assistance organizations, leading to inconsistent rent payments. It's okay to utilize assistance programs and to gamble with utilizing a percentage of your portfolio with assistance programs, but not 100% of your tenants should be on assistance programs. Many of the applications had poor credit previously. I can imagine that some of them had felonies, outstanding debt to previous landlords, unpaid rent and evictions. They were just riddled with bad paying tenants that weren't paying. So while on paper that maybe the occupancy was around 30% and 70% vacant, in reality they were really like 90% vacant inside of this particular property. And to add matters to make this property even worse, this property was not in the nicest area. In fact, there is a vacant property in between two buildings that's the same property, and this vacant property is run down and is not a good property. So it's the area is even a tough area to find leases for. So what did we do? What actions did we take as an organization in order to make this a more effective and help squeeze these margins and improve this overall process? So first and foremost, we had to remove the unreliable contractor and take over construction. So Red Maples directly oversaw the repairs and construction work, ensuring quality and completion. Our costs were optimized by cutting out dishonest labor and bringing in trusted team members. We knew that when the work was done, it was actually done. Before and after photos were actually verifying that the work that they said was being done was done, and our teammates put eyes on the property to verify that the work was being done. So costs were optimized by cutting out this dishonest labor, but also costs were cut because when you have dishonest labor, you don't know what materials they're using, and you don't know if they're using materials that they're buying for your job also on other jobs. And so we were able to make sure that we were efficiently using just the stuff that was bought for the property on the specific property. This resulted in faster unit turnover, a well-maintained property, and reduced repair fraud. And so by removing the unreliable contractor, taking over constructions, we were able to significantly speed up the timeline for construction projects, and the projects they were complete, tenants were then able to want to move into the property, which is a big differentiator when it comes to rental real estate. The properties have got to be finished. And I've did a whole live cast before, a whole podcast before on clean, safe, and functional and what it means to finish a construction project. If you haven't seen that video, go back and watch that video. It's fantastic. It's got fantastic information in it anyways, I should say. A team did a great job pulling it together. All right. The second thing was the placing well-qualified tenants. So we revamped the tenant screening process from what they were using to what we use at Red Maples. All tenants had to make at least 3 times the rent to ensure that they could afford it. Guys, we were getting pushback about this particular property from the owner wanting me to take rents that were income that was less than 3 times the rent. We stuck to our guns and it worked out. No tenants that we moved in have felony records or outstanding balances with past landlords. The tenants with the credit risk, so even though they didn't have outstanding balance, it might have been a little bit more of a risk. It's not the best area in the entire planet. So people are moving in with, a little bit less than perfect credit, but they're paying a double deposit is my point. So whatever the property is renting for, they're paying 2 times. They're paying 2 months rent plus 1 full month of rent. So they're paying the security deposit plus 1 full month's worth of rent in order to be able to move into the property, ensuring a stronger financial commitment. And what we got out of that was more consistent rent payments, reduced evictions, and longer-term occupancy out of every resident. We had a better quality of tenant that we were moving in. So you fix the contracting issues and you fix the screening criteria, and what do you get? A more profitable property. It seems like it's common sense. I really wish this stuff was common sense, but it's not common practice. And so that's why I was trying to help you walk you through this case study on what you can do to squeeze even more margin out. What specific things that you need to stick to your guns on. You need to really follow through on these things if you're going to deal with things in a tight market. So here was the turnaround. Here was the entire financial and operational turnaround. So what happened? Well, vacancy reduction. Like I said, it dropped from like 90% to below 25% in 9 months. You're like, well, why aren't you at 100%? Remember, it took me a number of months to just get rid of the bad contractor. Then the units now are occupied by more responsible paying tenants as well, because we placed good tenants, not bad tenants in this property. The revenue almost doubled inside the property, and the net operating income off of the property actually became real. It became realized. There was not any net operating income previously, and now they're starting to realize net operating income off the property, which means we significantly increase the value of the property, guys. You know how that works in small multifamily. There's a cap rate, there's an amount, and the way you determine the value of that property is you take the total net operating income, you divide it by that cap rate, and that gives you the purchase price of that property. And so if you go from 0, which that means the value of the property is not worth very much, and you start earning net operating income, that means that you significantly increase the value of that property, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. All right. The next thing is elimination of unpaid rent issues. So what does that mean? That means that new tenant policies ensured that the residents met the strict criteria and background requirements that we used in order to put them in. So the tenants that currently owed past, there was no tenants that currently owed past landlords. There was reduced collection obligations for us. There's less legal costs on the owner, all because we put better quality tenants inside of the property. You see how that works? You're not paying eviction fees. You're not paying tenants aren't falling behind on their rent because they have other debt obligations that they're not able to keep up with. And then lastly, there was long-term property stability and value growth on side the property with the improvements in tenant quality. The completed renovations, property significantly increased. The owner put, let's give you some round numbers. These aren't the exact numbers on this property, but I'm going to give you some round numbers of what this might feel like inside of your property. So the owner might have put around $20,000 into a property like this. Remember, it's about 20 units. The owner put about $20,000 into this. We had about a number of different vacants. Remember, it was almost 90% turnover inside of this property. There was issues. And so $20,000. Now, let's say that owner could potentially have around $48,000 in his account with security deposits and money collected. Put 20 in, pulled out 48 in cash. Now, has that all of that been distributed as net operating income? No, there's money held in security deposits. There's cash sitting there potentially for an owner in this situation, right? And so that's what I mean by long-term stability. You improve the cash collection, cash flow, and profitability of a business when you follow these types of policies and procedures inside of the business. So what does that mean? Well, overall, when you follow these processes, you have lower vacancy rates, higher rental income, more reliable tenants paying on time, and a well-maintained, fraud-free property. By removing this dishonest contractor and improving tenant quality and enforcing these strict financial policies that we just talked about on the show, guys, Red Maples was able to successfully transform a struggling property into a profitable investment. The data spoke for itself whenever we went back and looked at this property. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today, guys. I know inflation's rough. I know that there is some difficulty out there in the market on finding properties that have the right margins on them for you because inflation is real. And when inflation's real, you have to make adjustments. It's important that you understand lease structures and add-ons that generate additional revenue. But more importantly, it's important to understand that small cash flow tweaks can make a difference between surviving in this type of market and thriving in this type of market. And so I just wanted to make sure that we had this conversation today, guys, that you understood what you can do to significantly navigate to improve when margins are tight. I hope this was helpful, guys. I hope you learned a bunch of information that you can take back now and start applying. So with that said, that Renovation Nation brings us to the end of another episode. I'm Nathan Bush, your guide on this journey of real estate business growth. Remember, just like plants need the right air, soil, and care, our minds need the right environment to build a life of passion, purpose, and growth. Don't forget to get your citizenship to Mind Renovation Nation. So here's how you do it. You follow us by subscribing to the email list. That's at www.nathanbushmba.com. Then you hit subscribe on YouTube, and that will help you stay up to date with our latest episodes. Once you do those two things, what I want you to do is share this show with a friend so that friend can learn all about how we get together every Friday at noon and we talk about real estate investing. And I want you to join me next time for some more insights, inspiration, of course, a little bit of that nation-building spirit that drives us to create a community united by shared values, purpose, and a commitment to leaving a lasting legacy. Until then, let's keep building, keep growing, and let's lead more than 25,000 souls to a life of values-based investing. In our journey of Mind Renovation Nation, we often talk about personal growth, ethical leadership, and making impactful choices. Values-based investing is just an extension of that philosophy. It's about being a steward not only of our finances, but of our values and vision for the future. Signing off from the heart of St. Louis, stay blessed, stay inspired, and remember, every day is a chance to renovate your nation.